Hey guys, Mike here. In this video, we're going to talk about what is a singularity and how do I avoid it. If you've ever been moving your robot around and your robot just seems to stop and not want to pass a certain point, there's a couple of things that could cause that, and one of those is a singularity. I don't want to get too technical about what a singularity is in this video, but basically what it is when you have a joint line up. For example, this wrist joint right here. Right now I've got some angle to it, but if that was to line up, that is called a singularity. And robots do not like singularities. It's just a math thing. One example, just with my human arm here, and this is a bad example because we're not robots, but if you try to move your hand across your body and keep your hand pointed straight, right here when your wrist lines up, that is when your wrist is actually rotating the fastest. And it's the same for robots, and that's why they don't like it, because technically if you pass through a singularity, it has to spin that axis at an infinite speed. And obviously infinite speeds are impossible, so that's why robots don't like singularities. So let's talk about the most common singularity and the one that you should watch out for, and that is this joint 5 singularity. You can get singularities on basically all of your axes, but we're going to talk about joint 5 because it is 95% of the singularity problem. So I want to talk about that one, how to avoid it, and in order to do that, I'm going to give you a way to visualize it, and I call that the cone zone. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to move the robot up here, and this is going to make the top of the cone, and I'll explain. Okay, so you see that I have the camera at a higher position and pushed really close to the body of the robot. And we have no problem. I can move the robot around right here, and I could probably hit the robot at this point. So I'm gonna move it down just a little bit more until it stops. So it stopped, I'm running into that singularity. So this is what I would call the top of the cone. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to gradually move out and down until it stops. And as I do that, you're gonna see that it forms a line. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. So this would be the bottom of the cone, right? So we started up here, we followed this curved line down to this point, and if you take that line and you sweep it all the way around the robot, you end up with a cone-shaped surface, which I call the cone zone. And if you try to go through that surface, that's when you're gonna have issues with the singularity. You can work outside of that cone, you can work inside of that cone, but passing through it with coordinated moves, so that means linear, path, arc, orbit, anything that's not a joint move, you're gonna have issues. Now, it's worth mentioning here that this is true for a level camera. Once you start to add any tilt and pan, that will add more angle to your axis 5, and that helps. That changes the shape of the cone. But let's just stick with this assumption that the camera's level, and I'm going to show you how to work around this both when you're programming and when you're running. So let's first talk about, we're moving the camera around and we run into that cone. How do we work around that? So for example, let's say I'm looking at this skull and my DP wants me to back out a little bit. So I start backing out, boom, I hit the cone. There's a couple of things we can do here. First thing is we can kind of just go around the cone. So for example, I'll come out, go around that surface until I get the angle that I'm looking for. Somewhere around there, right? If you find that spot that you're happy with, and you go from there. Coming back, another thing we can do, all right, we run into the cone again. Tilt. That's actually a really easy way to almost eliminate the cone. And it really doesn't take a large amount of tilt. About 5 to 10 degrees, and the cone is essentially gone. You'll run into some issues in front of the robot if you do this, but with just a little bit of tilt, you can see that I can go right through what used to be the cone. So if you can allow it, if your shot allows for it, adding a little bit of tilt really opens up, eliminates a lot of restrictions from Singularities. Now I will say, by doing this, going through that cone zone, your J4 and your J6, they are going to have to turn a lot faster, so you're going to run into some speed limitations. But as long as you're doing slow moves and everything, that's not going to be a problem for you. The last thing I want to talk about, one more way to get around this is, let's say I want to be right here. This spot is in the cone. Now, again, we can't pass through the surface, so as long as my move is going to be inside of that, we'll be fine. But let me show you how to actually get into the cone. So I'm running into it right there. What I'm going to do, I'm going to pop over to my joint mode, and I'm just going to move J5 by itself. All right. So what I've done here is I've crossed through that singularity point. I'm going to go a little bit more, and now I can move into the cone, and I can go back to my live control, level out again, and now I'm inside the cone, and I can work inside that surface. So like I've said a few times now, you can't pass through that surface of the cone with a coordinated move, but you can with a joint move. So if you need to do that for a move, go ahead and watch my video on joint moves to learn more about that.